Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Shining Fates, make sure you go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using the code Omnipoke. For today's video, we are going to be looking over the first of probably many Rapid Strike Urshifu deck lists. This time it's going to be using Zacian V. And it's a very simple concept. Urshifu VMAX looks like one of the best attackers we've ever seen. Zacian has proven to be one of the best attackers we've ever seen. Let's mash those two great attackers together, and even when there's not much internal synergy here, just by having better attackers than everyone else, you'll be able to win games. That's pretty much the long and short of it. We've seen this as you go back through the eras where you just see, random like Luxray GL and Garchomp C-level X's popping up in like Gyarados decks or in like Gengar decks that also used Garchomp at the same time. Like, there was no business for these cards to be put in the same deck, even over the last few years where Zoroark Garbodor won the World Championships, and these two actively have anti-synergy with each other. You're turning off the best ability that we've ever seen, and it still managed to literally win the World Championships. And the long and short is, you're just mashing the best cards in the game together, because not all cards are made equal, and just saying, these are all very good, just go and do your thing. That's really the basic concept here. So let's jump into it. Flippancy aside, there is some great numbers behind these things as well. A Brave Blade doing 230 is fantastic for setting up VMAXs with that Gmax Rapid Flow. And that's the attack that we're trying to make the most out of here with the new Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX. If you're not familiar with it, it has that second attack for 2 fighting and 1 colorless. You're able to discard all energy from itself, and then this does 120 to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. So this is obviously very good at dealing with Crobats and Dedennes if you're able to gust them up, and you can then do 120 to a bench Pokemon, be it a 1-prizer, or setting up a tag team, setting up a VMAX so that you can Brave Blade finish them off. That's kind of the whole idea here. Obviously we gain some nice fighting type coverage as well, good into Pikarom, good into Eternatus, and a few other things out there as well. So yeah, we're pretty happy to be a fighting type right now. Gale Thrust is a 1 energy attacking option as well. And if anyone's been playing the new sort of Swordy Turbozation, you may notice that there are sort of off turns where you're not able to establish your next Zacian. So having a 1 energy sort of interlude attacker is great for you. Having that Gale Thrust 1 for 150 if it became your active this turn, very, very efficient. Now, we only play 3 Rapid Strike energies in the deck. That's the only way you can attack with Urshifu, but we do have good search options for it. We have Celebi in here. We have Guzma and Hala as well to try and access that card. So really, you're just trying to make the game go as few attacks as possible, trying to maybe do like Brave Blade into Gmax Rapid Flow into... well, sometimes that can already be the game. Well, not really, but you're going to do that into like a Gale Thrust or into another Brave Blade, that sort of thing. So you're really trying to just really condense the game into a very small number of turns, because all of these attacks are just very, very strong. So really, that's what we're going for here. We only have a 2-3 line of Urshifu because we're hoping that we just make one, and it's going to go for Gale Thrust into Gmax Rapid Flow or Gmax Rapid Flow into Gale Thrust. That will be all you need from him, and then Zacian can do the rest of the heavy lifting. That's the whole idea here. So we are going to play a 3-2 line, try and establish him and threaten him early on, but not really lean on him until possibly we've already used Zacian in those early stages. As with most Zacian decks that we've seen be successful, ADP, Luke Messel, even going to be the Corviknight Bronzong, I still choose to play 4 Zacian in that deck. We're doing the same thing here. The card is just so silly strong. It gets you 3 additional cards when you go first, which you probably want to do with this deck, because getting that value is insane. Whenever you hit energy cards, it's absolutely nutty. We're going to play Oranguru to try and make that more likely as well, so that we can threaten that turn 2 Brave Blade, an extremely terrifying proposition for a ton of different archetypes. You can knock out Vs that are trying to VMAX and get them before they evolve. It could be really nice into like Eternatus, into Dragapult, which might be making a comeback. Any of these Urshifu decks, they're all pretty much terrified of an early Brave Blade. So being able to threaten that is obviously very, very good. And even if you're hitting into tag teams and VMAXs, you're setting them up again for that Gmax Rapid Flow. That's the main synergy that we have between these two guys. Also, they, in theory, help each other, so you don't just insta-lose to a Psychic deck, or you don't just insta-lose to a fighting deck, a Fire deck, I should say, thanks to weakness. You're going to try and balance that out a lot more. And I think specifically, thinking about like Center Scorch and Victini VMAX, kind of the scariest Fire decks that Zacian doesn't really want to see, oftentimes they're using sort of cheeky one-prize Pokemon like Jirachis, that you can easily just snipe with Gmax Rapid Flow. They're always using Dedennes and Crobats so they can continue hitting their welders as well. And Gmax Rapid Flow is really good at dealing with that sort of stuff. So it actually does help the weakness a lot. And I think this is going to be one of the safest Zacian decks into the Fire matchups. I think a lot of them will be quite reasonable matchups for you overall. Outside of the Zacians, then, we just have a bunch of consistency cards, a couple of Dedennes and Crobat to draw us some pieces, Happy Match Eldegoss in here to try and get more bosses back, because obviously the Gmax Rapid Flow is still very good with bosses orders, so that you can knock out a Dedenne or a Crobat even at full hit points, thanks to that weakness that you hit them for. It can also give you access to Guzma Hala, which is actually kind of a big card in the deck. We're only playing one copy of Guz Hala, but it's an extra out to your Rapid Strike Energy, which is such a big deal. And it can also be, Marnie's, bosses, that sort of thing. So really nice one-off there. Guru has the obvious synergy with Intrepid Sword in those opening stages. It can also protect you against Marnie's from opponents, and it can also protect things like your one-of Eldegoss, your one-of Crobat, your one-of Urshifu, and just the fact that we're only playing 3 Rapid Strike Energies, you probably want to protect those when you're playing Dedennes and playing Researchers for the most part. And then we are playing 1 Woodland Stroll Celebi, again, just because of how important it is to fish out rapid energy on the right turn. And also, if you just get it in those opening stages, you can try and combine that with Primate Wisdom even, or just guarantee that you have that early game attachment for Zacian, always an important thing for you, so not a bad one-off to have either. Onto the trainers then, we just have 4 of the good cards, switches and air balloons to help pivot between our Zacians, and even between Urshifu if we're going to be using that first attack. 4 sources to power up Zacian quickly, 4 Com for Quick Ball to establish early Zacian once again, but also establish that Urshifu VMAX when we need it. We are playing 2 copies of Karate Belt. This allows us to simply attach Karate Belt and Rapid Strike Energy and do a Gmax Rapid Flow out of nowhere, essentially, against the opponent if we have suffered a knockout, or if we're behind on prize cards, I should say. So oftentimes this really works out nicely into VMAX matchups or tag team matchups where you sort of send Zacian into the fray, allow him to hit for like 220 damage, sorry, 230 damage, I should say, and set up, one of those 3 prizes, and then they knock out Zacian. They probably should be knocking out Zacian because it's too threatening to sort of be left on the board anyway. If your opponent's gusting around Zacian, you're already happy about that outcome. But if they're not doing that, you can then just Karate Belt attach, and you can have those sort of 5 prize turns where you gust up Dedenne, gust up Crobat, attach that Karate Belt, attach the Rapid Energy, and yeah, you're finishing them off after that Brave Blade, whilst also dealing with, either a 1-prize Pokemon or Dedenne or Crobat, like I said. So really huge swing turns with the help of Karate Belt that we're just playing 2 copies of, but again, Guz Hala could be putting in a big shift here. And we're just playing 1 Chaotic Swell. I don't feel like we necessarily need any specific stadium card, so we're just going to have the Swell to gobble up things, as we're probably still going to be in a Swell-heavy meta. Onto the supporters then. I've mentioned Guz Hala a lot. I think he sort of does wrap this package up in a nice bow just because he can fish out the energy and the Karate Belt at the right time to really give yourself some power spike turns. Yes, it's only a one-of, so maybe a little bit sketchy here. You could lean into it more, maybe eat into that Marnie count and have 2-2 if you really find the Guz Hala all that strong, because he can be really nice for the turn when he's ready. But naturally, just the amount of draw we have in the deck, you can just dig for Karate Belt anyway a lot of the time, so don't sweat it too much. I feel like it's just a nice additional card to have in here rather than the full build around. Then we have 3 Boss's Orders, 3 copies of Marnie, and 4 Professor's Research. Pretty simple stuff, just the best supporters in the game that we have available. And we are playing 10 basic Metal Energies, as well as those 3 Rapid Strike Energies. You possibly could think about playing 4, like the card is just that good, to be honest. At the moment, I feel like you typically only use Gmax Rapid Flow like once per game, sometimes twice per game, so you actually like never need the full 4 copies. It's just if you want to have that sort of stamp proofing, you can look to have that extra copy if you really want to. So the full list then, and it's always in the description below, so pause now if you'd like. But also, moving on to the tech options. The deck at the moment is so streamlined and so basic. Like, the trainers are just 4 ofs and then 2 ofs of the good tools and pretty much just the bread and butter supporters. So there's no flashiness going on here. All we're saying is that Zacian equals good and Urshifu equals good. We haven't actually like delved deep into the list and tried to mold it in any which way, but I certainly think that could be something you do try and go for here. Be it increasing your damage output with Rusted Sword / Telescopic Sight, and then having Zigzagoon in here. It means you can be quite dangerous and cheeky with your math in a ton of different situations. Telescopic Zigzagoon means you can knock out Dedennes. Rusted Sword Zigzagoon means you can knock out tag teams with 270 hit points. So both of those things could be worth considering. If you don't feel like the Karate Belt's doing all that much for you, if you think you're high enough tempo that you don't need it and you can have that free attachment here and there, you can go with different tools if you really want to. If you feel like pushing your opponent's Pokemon out the way is going to be useful, you could eat into that switch count and add in some ropes. Alternatively, you could also look to have Great Catcher in here for additional gusting, just because the Gmax Rapid Flow has such great synergy at dealing with Dedennes. Same thing again, if you don't really like the Karate Belts, you could think about having energy switches like we've seen with ADP. You could E-switch quickly off of Zacian onto your Urshifu, fulfill that colorless attack cost, then attach the Rapid Strike energy, and suddenly, again, you're bursting that damage out of nowhere, which is very powerful. Again, if we are using Karate Belt anyway, we might want to play on the back foot and increase our stamp count as well for disruption. So a few different item options there for sure. If we're worried about the amount of psychic attackers in the game, things like Mewtwo and stuff like that, you might want to put in Jirachi GX to protect yourself in that regard. You could think about having Mew just for mirror match situations. We will be an aggressive deck that is slamming Crobats and Dedennes to work towards our early Zacian a lot of the time, so protecting those snipes from the opponent could be reasonable. Also, especially if you are playing energy switches, I would definitely consider Empoleon V as an option to, again, help out in some of those fire matchups to give yourself an extra type coverage that could then lean into Urshifu very, very nicely. And at the same time, there's some other metal attackers. Aegislash, if you are still worried about Decidueye-based variants, at the moment we really don't have much hope with this list that's in front of you, but you can certainly add it in if you feel like it's a matchup that you'd want to improve your odds against. And also Mawile can be another way that you can force things into play. And actually, this can be really nice for your prize map. If you just hit any one prize Pokemon, you're extremely happy. If you hit any Dedenne or Crobat, you're, again, extremely happy. So that Captivating Wink, we've seen how annoying it is for ADP. Being able to just pick off those easy prizes, well, now you can make yourself have an easier prize map with your snipe options as well with a Captivating Wink Mawile. It's the thing that I most want to work into this list. I think it's very solid. I think right now the most flexible cards really are like the Guzma Hala and possibly the Celebi. Those are the cards that I'm kind of teetering on. Possibly you could remove one com as well at the same time. We have a lot of Pokemon search right now. I think those are the most flexible spaces to experiment with some of these cards, and I think they certainly could be reasonable. And yeah, Mawile is just a 2 energy attacker as well, which we're kind of lacking right now. You have the 1 energy attack of the VMAX, but sometimes you want it out of the firing line so you can make sure you can rapid flow. So just a few small things there. Onto the matchup overview, I actually think this deck is going to be very, very good. I just love that the sniping gives you a much better time against a lot of these one prize matchups. Possibly the Whimsicott is still going to be kind of awkward for you, but just the natural raw hit points of like Zacian in those opening stages and the tempo that you can have is quite solid against them, especially with the amount of like Marnies you can throw their way, that sort of thing. I think Luke Metal is going to be one of the more difficult ones. We don't have the sort of push potential right now of the other Zacian variants, so their tanking is just going to be very awkward for you. The Welder Mewtwo, I think, could be awkward because they're basically hitting us for both weaknesses. We can't, if we've got one of our attackers in the active, they can hit that for weakness, and then if we're trying to then send up the next Pokemon, they can then just burst a Mewtwo out and deal with the Urshifu instead. So on both fronts, they're hitting us for weakness, which is quite awkward. Decigoons is basically the hard loss right now. I'm not teching for it. You can if you really want to. And Dragapult as well, I think, is a little bit awkward. I think naturally the damage can rack up quite nicely for the Dragapult player, especially if they find early Horror Psychic Energies. It actually tends to go quite awkwardly for the Zacian just because they have such low hit points, and you're obviously not putting Urshifu down until you think it's like a safe chance to make it work. And you can't really burst the Urshifu into play too much with this deck, because Dragapult normally sets up KOs as well, so they can stay out of Karate Belt range and take like a 4-prize turn to win the game. So yeah, like I said, you can't get the GMAX Rapid Flow out of nowhere, and it's a bit of a risk to try and put it into play. So those are the things that I'd be most afraid of. Possibly things like Mad Party and Whimsy as well. But if you try and go early Zacian, navigate around their Mew and that sort of thing, and then try and weave in the Urshi late on whilst hitting them with like Marnies and stuff, you can probably get away with it, and it should be reasonable for you. So yeah, I think ultimately these two attackers are just so good that I think it's going to be a reasonable archetype. It may not be the most Urshifu of the Urshifu builds that I'm showing you today. This is more of a showcase of how good Zacian is, and then you just have the option to rapid flow at any point. So that's really the emphasis here. We've seen how good Zacian can be. You know, it succeeded with ADP, it succeeded with Fluke Metal, it's succeeding right now with Rusted Sword builds, which are still being ironed out, and they're still doing well. Even though, you know, there's a ton of different lists out there right now, it hasn't been streamlined just yet, and we haven't found the perfect 60, but it's still just doing well because the nature of Zacian and the amount of support it has around it is just solid. And trying to lean into that and have that good draw engine behind you as well. The Intrepid Sword, just such a good ability to get you into any game and get drawing cards. It's just fantastic. So yeah, I really do like that option. I also like playing a deck that doesn't mind going behind, just like how Picrom's been successful. It can make big comebacks just through the help of that Karate Belt. If you're ahead in the game as well, you're never too sad about that. And this deck can also do well against Reset Stamp, because Urshifu can, you know, map out prizes where you can take 3 prize turns, 4 prize turns, 5 prize turns at times, all in one go. So, you know, you're not going to be affected by Stamp from your opponent's end, and at the same time, you're not just digging for boss. Sometimes your win condition can be attaching a Rapid Strike energy, and when you're in those situations, you're feeling very happy indeed. Let me know what you guys think about this sort of list. Were you expecting Zacian to be possibly one of the better partners for Urshifu? I'll hear your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in another Battle Styles video soon. Cheers.